A store clerk sees a homeless man stealing food. When he checks the cameras, he can't believe what he sees. But when he follows him down the street, he discovers something that will change everything. The man isn't just stealing to survive, he's stealing to feed his daughter. And what happens next? It's something no one could have expected. It was a quiet night at Patterson's convenience store, a roadside shop on the edge of town. Ethan Miller stood behind the counter, absorbed in his monotonous routine. There wasn't much to do at that hour, just organize some products on the shelves, keep an eye on the flow of customers, and make sure everything was in order. As a clerk, his life boiled down to that, or at least he thought so. Sometimes he wondered if life wasn't a bit more than the sound of shelves being restocked and customers coming and going. He'd look out at the street through the window and think that if the store were on a busier street, his life might be a little more exciting. However, the only thing that really broke up the routine were unexpected visits from people with peculiar stories, or perhaps just the typical rushed customer trying to grab a quick snack. He was lost in thought when, through the store window, he noticed a man approaching. Marcus Hayes entered the store with a quick posture, but in a way that caught Ethan's attention. He had a tired look, worn clothes, and a backpack that seemed heavier than it should be. The man looked around quickly, first to the left, then to the right, as if checking whether anyone was watching him. Something wasn't right. The gesture was quick, but Ethan noticed. The man entered without hesitation. When he approached the shelves, his gaze fixed on some granola bars and packages of baby food. With suspicious agility, he grabbed a package of each and discreetly hid them under his coat, as if no one would notice. For Ethan, who was already used to this kind of situation, it seemed routine. It was just another theft, nothing special. He watched the man put more items in his backpack, this time bottles of juice and some cans of food. By all accounts, Marcus was stealing something simple, like anyone else who was hungry and wanted to avoid paying. Ethan thought about doing the obvious, call security and do what should be done. But something in the air stopped him. Something about that man, about his hurried manner, made Ethan hesitate. Why was he acting this way? He seemed scared, as if he were doing something wrong, but it wasn't just that. It was something more. Ethan found himself in a dilemma. The situation seemed simple, but at the same time there was something strange. Something he couldn't identify. He watched Marcus grab a few more items. The man looked around once more, then prepared to leave. Ethan saw the opportunity to act, but did nothing. He knew what he should do. Pick up the phone, call security, and make sure the theft was reported. It was what any clerk would do. But Ethan didn't do that. He felt an impulse, something he couldn't explain. He didn't know why he was doing this, but felt there was more to this story than it seemed. He couldn't get the image of the man crouching, trying to hide the food out of his head. Without thinking, Ethan made a decision that would change everything. Instead of acting as he always did, he decided to follow the man. He was aware that if he got caught, he could be fired. But something made him walk to the door and start following Marcus from a distance. He wasn't sure what he expected to find, but curiosity took over. He knew he was making a strange decision, but couldn't ignore what he saw. Why would a man be in such a hurry? Why would he hide while taking food? As he moved away from the store, Ethan kept a safe distance. He could see Marcus walking fast, with a rigid posture. The man seemed to be in a hurry, but wasn't running. He was heading toward the deserted street. Where could he be going? Ethan wondered. It was a cold night, and the streets were empty. Only a few lights from the stores illuminated the path. Marcus seemed determined, walking without looking back, but Ethan didn't lose sight of him. The man turned corners, always staying a good distance from the light of the stores, as if he knew where he was going and what he was doing. Ethan wondered if he was doing the right thing. Why was he following a man who was probably stealing? He didn't know, but felt that something was about to happen, something he couldn't ignore. Something inside him said he was closer to understanding Marcus's story than he could ever imagine. But what would he discover? As they followed through the deserted streets, the silence seemed to grow denser. Ethan observed Marcus's steps, his backpack swaying as he walked hurriedly. Finally, after a few minutes of walking, Marcus entered a parking lot. Ethan approached closer, trying to stay hidden in the shadows of the trees. He looked around, making sure no one was watching him. The tension on the street increased. Ethan knew he was about to discover something important. He wasn't sure what it was, but the feeling that something was about to change enveloped him. And then, he saw Marcus stopping near a car. He looked at the vehicle and carefully removed his backpack. What would he do now? Ethan was about to see the truth that would change his perception of everything. Ethan couldn't turn back now. Something inside him compelled him to follow Marcus, to go down one more deserted street and take one more step toward a stranger who seemed so distant and irrelevant, but at the same time, so crucial. Marcus seemed to be running from something much deeper than the simple theft of some food packages. What was behind it? As they followed him, Ethan couldn't help but notice how Marcus walked hurriedly, but with a posture that seemed not to want to draw attention. It was a tense walk, almost furtive. The man looked around frequently, always alert to any movement that might betray his presence. What did he fear so much? It was a familiar route, but that night it seemed different. The street was silent, and the city lights blinked in the distance as if the night itself were watching. Marcus didn't look back. With each step Ethan took, he felt more and more tension in the air. He wanted to get closer but couldn't. He needed answers, and all he had so far were questions. They reached a point where the street seemed to end. The parking lot was empty, and there was nothing else but a few poorly parked cars and a dense air of abandonment. The sound of footsteps echoed through the empty environment. Ethan, always at a good distance, continued to follow, not knowing what he was looking for, but certain that there was something there he needed to understand. When Marcus got near a car, Ethan hid behind a pile of boxes in the corner of the parking lot. From there he could see without being seen. Marcus took the backpack off his back, looked around once more, and finally got into the car. The scene was quick. The man seemed to be in an automatic movement, almost as if he were in a safe place, a place where he knew he could finally relax, even if for a moment. Ethan could see the car door open, but couldn't make out much more than that. The dim streetlight indirectly illuminated what was happening there, creating shadows on the car windows. Marcus seemed relieved, but something in his behavior still intrigued him. He wasn't just a man trying to survive. The way he looked around, the way he hurried, all of it pointed to something much bigger, much more distressing than simple food theft. Ethan didn't know what to do. He was so close to discovering the truth, but at the same time, he felt more distant. He knew something was wrong, but what? What was Marcus doing there, alone with his backpack full of stolen food? And why did his behavior seem to be linked to something more urgent than simply lacking money? Suddenly, Marcus got out of the car with an object in his hands. Ethan blinked and tried to focus better. It was a bottle of juice. He grabbed it and got back in the car. The door closed and Ethan saw the figure of Lily, Marcus's young daughter, inside the car with big curious eyes watching her father. What was happening there? What was he trying to hide? Ethan's mind was racing. He never imagined that a simple night at work could lead to such an unusual situation. He didn't know what was happening, but the feeling that something bigger was at stake bothered him. He watched more attentively now, closer, but still not knowing what to do. He couldn't leave now. Not now. Marcus looked quickly at the street once more, perhaps feeling the weight of everything that was happening, as if his life had come down to that moment of tension. Could he be running from something? Or was he just trying to do whatever was necessary to take care of his daughter? Ethan felt there was finally something more to this man. He wasn't just stealing. He was trying to survive. But survive what? Who was Marcus really beyond a simple man stealing food? And the child? Ethan's anguish grew, and for a moment he thought about leaving. Maybe the best thing would be to just continue with his routine as he always had. But looking at the car with the light illuminating the child and the man, he felt he couldn't simply ignore it. There was a story there. A story of life, of struggle, of suffering. A story he still didn't fully understand, but that called him to do something about it. Ethan stayed there, at a distance, watching the two. He knew this wouldn't be a common situation, that the situation wouldn't end with a simple theft being solved by security. Something bigger was at stake, something he still couldn't fully comprehend, but was now within his reach. Ethan continued to watch from afar. Marcus no longer seemed like the man he had seen entering the store with hurried distrust. Now he was sitting in the driver's seat, head down, still with the juice bottle in his hands, and seemed lost in thought. The parking lot light illuminated the scene in a strange way. He was quiet, as if the world around him had disappeared for a moment. Ethan didn't know how much time had passed. He was there, frozen, watching, trying to understand what was happening. Then finally, Marcus raised his head and looked at the passenger seat. Lily was there with the little juice bottle in her hands, drinking slowly. She looked at her father, and her big eyes shone in the dim light of the car. Marcus smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was a tired smile, a smile from someone who no longer knew how far they could go. Ethan was still at a good distance, but something began to happen inside him. He couldn't stop watching that scene. The man he thought was a simple thief was now revealing much more than that. He wasn't stealing for himself, he was stealing for his daughter, a small and vulnerable child, who probably didn't know what was really happening. Ethan began to realize then that Marcus's story wasn't what he imagined. It was clear now that Marcus wasn't a common criminal. He wasn't a man stealing for pleasure or addiction. He was doing whatever was necessary to keep his daughter alive. But how had he reached this point? How could a man end up at this level of desperation without more resources, without anyone to help? The image of Marcus's daughter, with her eyes shining with curiosity as she drank the juice, stayed etched in Ethan's mind. He could no longer look at the scene as before. He saw the man as a father trying to give the best to his daughter despite all adversities. It wasn't just a theft, it was a sacrifice. Ethan felt a kind of remorse. He could no longer see him as the villain of the story. Marcus was fighting for his daughter's life. And what was he, Ethan, doing? Just watching? What should he do next? Ethan's mind was full of unanswered questions. Then, without thinking much, Ethan took a step toward the car. He was deciding to do something he never imagined doing. Something that seemed wrong, but at the same time, absolutely right. He approached the car window, keeping his distance. Marcus no longer seemed so tense. He seemed somehow relieved, as if the simple act of feeding his daughter had given a little peace to that moment of chaos. Ethan felt that moment was much deeper than he imagined. He was facing a man who had lost everything, but who was still trying to maintain dignity for his daughter. Marcus's world had been turned upside down when he lost his wife. He was alone in the world, and now all he had was Lily. He was a homeless man, without a job, but full of love for his daughter. That was all he had. What would I do if I were him? Ethan thought, as he watched Marcus stroke his daughter's head, who seemed completely at ease in her world. He wondered, would I be able to do all this for someone I love? Ethan didn't know how things would end for Marcus and his daughter. What he knew, however, was that he couldn't simply leave and do what he would normally do. He couldn't ignore the struggle of that family. He couldn't ignore Marcus's suffering, and what touched him most was the fact that all that man wanted was to take care of Lily in the best way possible, even if it meant sacrificing his own morality and dignity. He didn't know what to do next, but knew the next step couldn't simply be going back to his life as it was. He was facing a choice that would change everything. He felt he had to help somehow. But how? What could he do? Ethan, then, took a step forward. Marcus raised his eyes and saw him. He was there, standing, watching Marcus. What would he say? What would he do? The silence between them was dense, but in his heart, Ethan knew this wasn't just an opportunity to help someone. It was an opportunity to change something bigger. He could be just another person who watched and turned their back, or he could make a difference. What would he choose? Ethan felt his heart beat faster. He didn't know exactly what he was doing there, but knew he couldn't turn back now. He was facing a decision that somehow would define not only Marcus and Lily's life, but also his. He took another step toward the car, now closer to Marcus, who was sitting head down as if waiting for something. Perhaps an answer, salvation, or just a moment of peace. "Hey," Ethan said, his voice coming out lower than he intended. Marcus quickly looked at him, his eyes tired, almost disoriented, as if he didn't know how to react. For a moment the two stared at each other. The man in front of him seemed like a stranger, but at the same time, something in his eyes said he was also lost, just like Ethan in the midst of this unexpected encounter. "I saw what you did," Ethan continued, cautiously. He didn't want to accuse Marcus, didn't want to pressure him. He wanted more to understand. "I saw what you were taking from the store." The man was silent for a moment, as if waiting for a reprimand, but Ethan just maintained his gaze, trying not to be a judge. Marcus, with dirty and trembling hands, looked at the seat beside him, where Lily was quiet, but still watching everything. He seemed to hesitate. Ethan didn't know what was going through Marcus's head, but could feel he was trying to stay calm, as if he were keeping something much bigger inside him. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice hoarse and tired. I just wanted to give her something, you know. She's hungry. And He stopped with a heavy sigh, as if that burden were harder to carry than anything physical he had ever faced. "I understand," Ethan responded, lowering his guard a bit. He knew he couldn't just look at that man as someone who had made a mistake. He needed to understand more. "I didn't know what you were going through. Ethan stopped, feeling a force forming inside him, a feeling that he could somehow help, not in an impersonal way as many would, but in a more real way. "I'm the owner's son," Ethan finally said, in an impulse of sincerity. Marcus looked at him, now more surprised. I can help you." He hesitated for a second, but the truth was already coming out. "I can get you a job, something temporary if you need it. I can help you find a place to stay." Marcus looked at him with disbelief. "What?" He seemed shocked, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. He looked at Lily again, as if trying to understand what he had just heard. "You're not alone," Ethan continued, his voice firmer now, knowing that what he was saying wasn't just any proposal, but something that could actually change Marcus and Lily's life. "I know things are tough. I know it's complicated. But it doesn't have to be this way. I can help you start over for real." Marcus seemed in shock, still not believing what was being said. He was almost paralyzed, his hands trembling as he looked at Ethan. For a moment he seemed speechless, not knowing whether to believe or if it was just another empty promise. But something in Ethan's attitude made him see he wasn't joking. There was sincerity there. I don't know what to say," Marcus finally murmured, the words coming out of his mouth with difficulty. He didn't know if he was dreaming, or if this was real. Ethan could see the desperation in Marcus's eyes, a desperation that was replaced by a spark of hope, something he hadn't seen in a long time. I need to take care of her." Marcus looked at Lily, who was quiet, now with her eyes fixed on the conversation. She seemed to be the center of Marcus's universe, and Ethan knew it was for her that he was making all this effort. It was for her that he was willing to sacrifice himself. "I know, and I want to help you do that," Ethan said firmly. "I know it won't be easy, but one step at a time. We'll start with this. We'll start with a job." Ethan knew that what he was offering Marcus wasn't a magic solution. He wasn't solving all the problems at once, but he was offering something real, something Marcus could grasp. He was offering a chance, an opportunity to start over. Marcus looked at him, still incredulous. "But I don't have anywhere to stay." Ethan thought for a moment. He didn't have all the answers, but knew that what he was offering was something that could change everything for them. Lily didn't need to grow up in a world of uncertainties. Marcus didn't need to live with the weight of guilt for not being able to give his daughter what she deserved. "I can help you find a place to stay, a temporary place, something until things settle down," Ethan said, with a confidence he didn't know he had. Ethan knew that what he was doing wasn't something common. He wasn't just offering a job or a house. He was offering a possibility, something that could completely change Marcus and Lily's future. He was taking a step outside his comfort zone, doing something no one would ever imagine from a simple store clerk. It was a life opportunity. "Let's start with this," Ethan finally said with a slight smile, trying to convey confidence to Marcus. After the unexpected conversation in the parking lot, Marcus and Ethan exchanged one last look before heading in opposite directions. Marcus got in the car, and Ethan remained there, watching as the man and his daughter headed to an uncertain destination. The streetlight still illuminated them both, now once again in motion, but with something more, a hope that hadn't been there before. Ethan felt the weight of the decision he had just made. He wasn't just offering a job or a roof. He was offering a new chance, a new beginning. Something Marcus never imagined he would have. And Lily, the little child who seemed to be the reason for everything Marcus did, now had an opportunity to live in a way that perhaps before was impossible. In the following days, Marcus and Lily's life changed slowly but noticeably. Ethan helped Marcus start his job at the store, placing him in a simple position, but one that gave him the dignity of being able to work to earn what he needed. At first, Marcus was hesitant. He wasn't used to having someone offer him a chance, and the fear of failing always seemed to lurk. But over time, Marcus began to open up. He worked the shelves organizing products with a precision that surprised even Ethan. He no longer dragged himself with the weight of desperation. Each day seemed to be one more step in the right direction. The job gave him a sense of control, of purpose. He was no longer just the homeless man, the man who stole to survive. He was beginning to see himself differently, as someone with value, with the ability to change his own life. And Lily, the little one, became the center of everything. She started attending school in town. Those store walls that before seemed tight for Marcus were now a refuge. Lily's presence, with her laughter and curiosity, transformed the environment around them. Ethan saw Marcus's transformation every day, but saw Lily's transformation even more, from a shy and insecure girl to a child who was beginning to gain confidence and friendship at school. Ethan observed all this from afar, but not without being touched. He found himself more present in Marcus and Lily's daily life, helping with small things. Sometimes he even took them back to where they were staying temporarily, a small provisional apartment he had gotten for them, where they could start rebuilding something that resembled a home. But Marcus's transformation wasn't just external. He was beginning to feel more secure, more worthy. Each day he spent at work, each smile from Lily, each small progress, was a victory. Marcus knew he still had a lot ahead. He wasn't blind to the difficulty of the path he still had to walk, but hope, now, was a constant ally. However, reality still had its way of making itself present. The difficulties wouldn't disappear just because he now had a chance. There was still the weight of life on the streets, and with it, the constant reminder that for many everything could crumble in the blink of an eye. Insecurity was a shadow that always followed him. One day Marcus arrived earlier at the store. Ethan was at the counter as usual, doing what was needed to keep the store's rhythm. Marcus approached him with a serious look. The man, who was already beginning to be seen by others as someone reliable, now showed a new kind of vulnerability. "Ethan," Marcus said with a voice that seemed lower than normal, I don't know how to thank you. I really don't know what I would have done without your help." He looked at Ethan, without the usual resistance, but with raw sincerity. "I know I'm still starting, but you really gave me a chance." Ethan, surprised by the conversation, looked at Marcus and, not knowing what to say, just smiled. "You're doing everything for yourself, Marcus. I just gave you an opportunity. The rest is you." But deep down, Ethan knew it wasn't just the chance that was changing Marcus's life. It wasn't just the job. It was the trust, the support, the feeling that someone believed in him. He was no longer just a homeless man or a criminal. He was now a man who had a second chance. This chance was changing not only Marcus's life, but Ethan's too. He was beginning to realize that by helping Marcus, he was changing something inside himself. He no longer saw the world the same way. He no longer saw people just as strangers or unknowns, but as someone who might have their own struggle, their own stories he had never imagined. Ethan was no longer the apathetic clerk. He was a man who had chosen to look at the other and perceive humanity. He had given something more important than a job. He had given a fresh start. But there was still much to come. Marcus knew his struggle wouldn't end there. But he had something now he never had before, the opportunity to fight, to rise again. He had the job, the roof, and the support to give his daughter a better life. And that, after all, was all he wanted. The weeks passed, and as time advanced, Marcus seemed to adapt to the new routine. He had been working at the store for a few months now and gradually was beginning to establish himself. Lily already attended school more frequently, and Ethan saw her smile more than ever, always excited to tell about the day's new adventures. Their transformation was remarkable. Marcus was no longer the dirty and desperate man Ethan had found in the parking lot, but a man who had begun to rebuild his life. The convenience store, which was already part of Ethan's daily life, also became the stage for many changes for Marcus. He was beginning to be more respected by other employees and even by customers. In the eyes of many, he was just another worker trying to do his best for his family. But for Ethan, he was much more. He was proof that life could be transformed, that a simple gesture of kindness could really make a difference. But as always happens, life has a way of testing the limits of those decisions. Ethan still felt that something was coming. What he didn't know was that this change was about to be tested in a way he never imagined. It was an ordinary afternoon when the store manager, Brian, contacted Ethan with a serious expression. Brian was agitated and seemed to have something important to discuss. Ethan immediately noticed something was wrong. "Ethan," Brian said in a more serious tone than usual, "I need you to come here now. We have a problem with Marcus." Ethan was surprised. Marcus? It couldn't be. What could have happened? He never imagined something could go wrong. After all, Marcus was improving, gaining confidence, working hard. Ethan, still with his heart tight, headed to the store, ready to resolve whatever was necessary. When he arrived at the office, he saw Marcus, standing with sagging shoulders. He looked exhausted, with the expression of someone who had just gone through an ordeal. Ethan felt a wave of worry and confusion. What had happened? Brian looked at Ethan with a look that indicated he was also uncertain about what was happening. "Ethan, I really don't know how this happened." Brian paused, trying to find the right words. "But we found money missing from the register. Not much, but enough to call attention." Those words hit Ethan like a punch to the stomach. He looked at Marcus, who couldn't keep Ethan's eyes. He seemed desperate but didn't seem guilty. Marcus had done so much right up to that point. It seemed impossible he was involved in something like this. You stole from the store, Marcus?" Ethan asked, the pain evident in his voice. He wanted to believe it wasn't true, but knew he needed to hear the answer. Marcus remained silent for a moment, his eyes empty. Finally, he spoke. "No, I didn't do it." His voice was low, but determined. "I would never do that. I know what you did for me and my daughter. No, I didn't do it." But the evidence was there. The money was missing, and everyone was convinced Marcus was responsible. Ethan was torn. He wanted to believe in Marcus, but what about the evidence? What would he do now? The dilemma that followed was like a character test for Ethan. He believed in Marcus's change, but also knew that, without proof, he couldn't simply ignore what seemed to be a direct violation of the store's trust. What would he do now? Could he believe in Marcus and risk being deceived, or simply follow the rules and give the store what it asked for? He knew there was much more at stake now. It was no longer a simple question of theft. It was a question of faith, trust, and difficult choices. Marcus seemed even more broken now. He looked at Ethan with eyes that begged for understanding, but also carried the weight of shame. He no longer knew what to do. He knew he had given everything he could, but deep down, something told him he was about to lose everything. Once again. "I didn't do it, Ethan. I swear I didn't." Marcus repeated, his voice lower, but still full of emotion. "I have my daughter to take care of. I'm not that kind of person. Not after everything you've done for me." The tension in the air was palpable. Ethan looked at Marcus and then at Brian. He felt an anguish in his chest, a knot he couldn't untie. He didn't know what to do. He wanted to believe in Marcus, wanted to see in him the man he had found on that street, the father who had done everything to care for his daughter. But the evidence was there. Ethan stepped away for a moment, trying to gather his thoughts. He knew that whatever his decision, it would have a profound impact. He couldn't simply throw away everything he had done for Marcus because of an accusation that, although it could be false, still put him in a difficult position. He didn't know if he could risk his own integrity, his position at the store, because of blind faith. But looking at Marcus and thinking about everything he had been through, about everything he was still fighting to achieve, Ethan knew that if there was any chance Marcus was innocent, he would have to give him that chance. "I'm going to investigate this further. We're not making any hasty decisions," Ethan said with renewed firmness. "But Marcus, know that whatever the truth is, I'll be here for you." The following days were a whirlwind. Ethan found himself immersed in doubt. He knew the evidence was against Marcus and at the same time, felt in his heart he hadn't done it. The pressure of his position at the store and the desire to protect Marcus and Lily were opposites in his heart. But there was one thing Ethan knew. He couldn't simply abandon Marcus without being sure he was doing the right thing. With Brian's help, he decided to investigate the incident further. They requested access to the security cameras and reviewed the footage. To Ethan's surprise, something he hadn't considered before happened. The images showed that, in fact, the missing money wasn't taken by Marcus. The camera had caught another employee who had diverted from the register during Marcus's shift. Ethan felt a wave of relief mixed with disbelief. He had been right all along. Marcus was innocent. The anger and relief mixed in his chest as he confronted the real culprit, an employee who had deceived everyone. The sense of injustice he had felt seeing Marcus being accused disappeared, but not without leaving a mark. He had been tested, and now he knew that faith in people could be rewarded. With the truth now revealed, Ethan went to Marcus to tell him the good news. He entered the small apartment where Marcus and Lily lived, and the two were gathered around a simple table, with a dinner Marcus had prepared for his daughter. Lily smiled seeing Ethan enter, and Marcus stood up with a cautious look, as if still not believing what he was about to hear. "Marcus, I found the truth," Ethan said with a smile. "You're free of any accusation. It wasn't you. The real culprit was another store employee." Marcus was silent for a moment, and then his expression softened. He took a deep breath as if all the weight he had been carrying over the days was lifted all at once. He smiled, but it was a smile from someone who had carried an immense burden for too long. "I knew you believed in me," Marcus said with a trembling voice. "I knew you wouldn't let me fall. But it's hard. When all you have are your words against the world, you start to doubt even yourself." Ethan looked at Lily, who was smiling beside her father, and felt a wave of pride. He knew the decision to help them wasn't just about work or financial help. It was about giving them a chance to believe in themselves again. Ethan, more than anyone, knew we all need a second chance, a turning point to start over. "You're not alone, Marcus," Ethan responded. "You never were. Now let's do whatever's necessary to ensure you both have a better future." The tension that before hung in the air now dissipated. Marcus, with Ethan's help, became a new person, no longer the man who stole to feed his daughter, but a proud father, with a job and a future ahead of him. Lily, with her innocent smile and shining eyes, now had opportunities. She was no longer a child without a future, but a child who would have the chance to grow up with her father's love and the help of a man who believed in her. In the following days, Marcus established himself as a store employee, and with Ethan's help, he got a place to live with Lily, something more permanent. He no longer needed to hide or constantly fight to survive. He now had the chance to live with dignity, something that before seemed impossible. Ethan, for his part, also went through a change. He was no longer just the store clerk. He was someone who could make a difference in others' lives. His trust in Marcus and his willingness to help transformed him into a different person. He no longer saw the world the same way. Helping someone, giving a second chance, not only changed Marcus and Lily's life, but also shaped Ethan's life. Marcus and Lily's story was marked by twists, surprises, and moments of tension, but in the end, it was also a story of redemption. The story of how a man, when given the right support and the right opportunity, can change everything. And Ethan's story, the store clerk who believed in something bigger than himself, showed the power of a simple choice, a choice of compassion and faith. Thank you so much for watching this story until the end. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave a like, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next ones. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you think about the choices made by the characters? Do you agree with how things unfolded, or would you have done something different? Drop your opinion in the comments below.